Today I'm going to share with you 8 things that you are probably doing wrong if you're trying to set up your LLC on your own. Ready? Let's do this. Hey gang, my name is Jim Hart. If you're new to the channel, I am a trademark lawyer. I run a trademark law firm called Hawthorn Law. We also do a great deal of LLCs as well, which is why I want to share with you today 8 of the most common, biggest mistakes that I see people make with their LLCs on a regular basis. I've done a number of videos like this in the past, but don't worry, this one is new and updated for 2023, including a new mug that I just got this past weekend while we were traveling here in Europe. So let's just get right into it. I've got a cat here that might try and get in the photo. In fact, here she comes, but you can't see her because she's too far down there. Okay. So if you're a brand new entrepreneur who's trying to legally protect your business, but you're not sure how to do that or what to do, then this video is going to be absolutely perfect for you. And it's important because if you mess up your LLC, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it can be problematic. I mean, they're not gonna like put you in cuffs and send you to jail like some former presidents we have, but you could have some issues. I mean, it could expose you to personal liability, which is the whole point of forming an LLC in the first place, is you want to avoid personal liability for the debts or obligations of your business. It could cause you issues come tax time with the IRS if you mess up the way that you're dealing with the taxes related to your LLC. Or, ultimately you could do something wrong that could cause your business to fail. I mean, I guess that would be an extreme example, but yeah, it could happen. I've actually dealt with clients who mess things up with their LLC, things that I'm about to tell you that you can do to mess up your LLC, and they had serious issues and serious problems down the road because the owner of the LLC had actually passed away, and so there was no way they could go back and fix it. So these are all issues that you need to be aware of. Let's just hop right into it. The first issue, the biggest issue that I see from entrepreneurs almost all the time, and I get comments on this quite regularly on the videos. In fact, I just got another comment from somebody yesterday about this, is they want to go ahead and file their LLC in the wrong state. And what I mean by that, so they're enticed by states like Delaware, where they've heard a lot of corporations file their corporate paperwork, or Nevada, where there's no income tax, or Wyoming because of the anonymity related to Wyoming, or New Mexico, because there's also some anonymity there, or some other state where they think, oh, this is gonna be great, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna set up our LLC in this state, and because of all these benefits related to that state, and that's gonna be amazing. The problem is, when you do that, you're really just wasting your money because you still have to file your LLC in the state where you live. And I would say 99.9% of the time, when I'm dealing with clients and they're asking me where should they set up their LLC, the answer is going to be the state where you live. Now, there are some exceptions, and I'm not going to get into those exceptions here today, but just know that please don't do this. If you are setting up an LLC and you're going to be a single member LLC, or maybe you're going to business with a spouse or a friend and it's a small business to begin with, maybe you do have plans to grow, and that's fine. If you have plans to grow, at some point later on down the road, you can always move your LLC to another state or set it up as a corporation if you need to. But when you're just getting started, all those benefits, the anonymity actually can be a problem. I had a client that they couldn't access things related to their LLC because they filed in Wyoming, and that was a problem. Or the fact that a state doesn't have an income tax. It doesn't matter if you live in a state that does have an income tax. Like until we left to move to Portugal, I lived in North Carolina where there is an income tax, and I had previously had my law firm in Florida where we also lived where there's no income tax. Well, I had to move my law firm to North Carolina because that's where I lived and that's where I practiced law. So there's really no reason for you to be doing something in a state other than where you live, because you're just going to end up having to pay 2 separate fees, one for the state where you decide to form your LLC, and one to your home state where you're going to be forming a foreign entity. So really it doesn't matter. It doesn't make it, just don't do it, okay? Just don't do it. The second mistake I see people making is they use the wrong address on the articles of organization when they're setting up their LLC. And so how does this work? Well, typically they're either going to use their home address, which is not necessarily a problem. There's nothing wrong with using your home address. You can do that. Or they use a PO box, or they use the registered agent address. Now we're going to get into what a registered agent is here in just a minute and how people mess that up. But when you're trying to list the address of your business on your articles of organization, typically the state where you're filing your LLC is going to have some very strict requirements regarding what that address can be. And in some states it can be a PO box, in other states it's not allowed to be a PO box, and you need to check with the state where you're filing to make sure you do that right. I don't recommend that you use your home address, and why is that? Well, the reason is primarily for privacy reasons, so that you're not putting your home address out there. It's going to be filed with the Secretary of State in most states, except for, like I said, Wyoming. It's going to become public record, but the best way to get around that is to use a virtual address as your business address. So you're gonna go out and lease some space, or you're gonna do a lease with a virtual company that allows you to get an office lease with them for a small amount of money each month, or you use a mail forwarding service or something like that. You wanna make sure that you use some sort of virtual address that's not your home address, or a physical address that is either from a virtual company or someplace else as the business address. But again, check with the rules in your state to make sure you do this correctly. And please, please, please do not use, unless you have a separate contract with your registered agent, whoever you might use for that, to serve as also the business address for your company, do not use the registered agent address for the business address. That's actually gonna make them really angry with you, and it could incur additional fees, and they might withdraw as your registered agent, and there could be all sorts of issues that happens if you do that. So do not use the registered agent address as your business address. That is a big no-no. Number 3 is to not use a registered agent. And this is something that a lot of people will think, well, wait a minute, I can save some money, a couple $100 a year, by just listing my own personal address as the registered agent address and serving as the registered agent myself. The problem with that is, unless you plan on being in your home during normal business hours every day of the year that a business would be open in your state, that's going to be problematic. Most people, like to take vacations, or they have to pick their kids up from school, or they need to go to the grocery store, run other errands. Most people do not spend every waking moment in their house. And if you're not there and something comes, in the very, very unlikely event that something comes that needs to be served on the registered agent for your business and you're not there to get it, that's going to be a problem for you. So make sure you do not use your home address as the registered agent address. Can you do it? Yeah, you can, but I think you're taking a big risk and a big gamble if you do it that way. Make sure you use a corporate registered agent. I'll include a link down below to a service that we recommend. Also, my firm can serve as a registered agent in all 50 states if you want to use us as well. Number 4, you file that S election way too soon. This happens all the time. I see a lot of people set up their LLCs. They've got all these aspirations of how they're gonna do as a business, that they're gonna make all this money and things are gonna be great, and they don't realize that it takes longer to build a business than you actually think it does. It's unfortunate, but it is kind of the way things work in this world. And so if you file that S election too soon, too early on, then you could actually be shooting yourself in the foot, because you're going to be incurring a lot of extra money for accounting fees and to file an extra tax return that you don't necessarily need to file, and for all sorts of other things that it might not actually be worth it to you. On the other hand, there's other people that don't file that S Corp election when they should, and they can actually cost themselves tens of thousands of dollars in extra taxes that they'd have to pay if they had just gone ahead and filed that S election. So I see it both ways. The proper way to do this is, once you hit that threshold where you're making enough money to really sustain the business and to sustain an S election and pay for the additional costs related to that S election, then you want to go ahead and file that. Now, there is a requirement from the IRS. You have to do it within 75 days, I believe, of when you form your LLC, or within 75 days of the beginning of the tax year. So right now, as I'm recording this, it's almost the end of March, so we've already passed that 75-day threshold for 2023, but there is a late filing, late election procedure in place from the IRS. So if you have questions about that, make sure you reach out to your accountant and they can help you make sure you get that right. I hope I don't look too tired. I'm getting a little tired here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a quick coffee break, and I have something to show you, and that is my new coffee mug. And this is from São Miguel in the Azores Islands, which is where we just spent the past couple days, this past weekend. They're a group of islands in the North Atlantic. They are governed by Portugal. They're kind of part of Portugal, although they're also independent of Portugal. So I'm not quite sure if they have like their own president and stuff. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure how it works. But anyway, we went to visit there. I highly recommend, if you ever get the chance, heading out there. It was really cool. Saw some really cool things. Saw a lot of cows and hot springs and cool rock formations and all sorts of stuff. I'll include pictures. There's some pictures on my Instagram channel if you want to follow me there. New coffee mug too. There you go. Number 5. I need to wipe my glasses off. I'll be right back. All right, that is way better. So this next issue I see from a lot of people, and that is that they file their articles of organization and then they kind of clap their hands and they put the articles of organization in a drawer or put them on some virtual drive on their computer, and they actually don't do anything else. They think, oh, I formed my LLC, that's it, I don't have anything else to do. Well, there are so many other things that you have to do as part of setting up your LLC. It's not just a matter of setting up the LLC by filing those articles of organization and then just letting it go. You know, you're gonna need to file, you need to get an EIN number, you need to set up a business bank account, you need to follow all the corporate formalities, you need to get an operating agreement, you do all these things. And so if you don't do those, you really are putting yourself at risk of exposing yourself to personal liability if something should happen with the LLC. If you want a full checklist of all those things that you need to do, I include a checklist down below, and I also have a course on how to set up your LLC properly if you want to check that out. That's gonna be the best thing for you to do, is just go through that, or just hire someone like me to help you set up your LLC for you, and we'll make sure you do it the right way. So this corresponds nicely to number 6, I think we're at, which is to make sure you have that LLC operating agreement in place. So what is an operating agreement? It's an agreement between you and kind of the LLC that kind of governs everything that you do with the LLC. It talks about, you know, what you can and can't do, whether you can take out debts for the LLC, whether you know, when you're gonna take out profits, how you're gonna pay yourself, the tax election you're gonna make, different things like that. So you definitely, where you're gonna set up your business bank account. So you definitely wanna make sure you have that operating agreement in place. If you have a multi-member LLC, and what is that? That means that you are going to business with a business partner as well, then you're probably gonna wanna have an attorney draft a multi-member operating agreement for you. But if it's just you still wanna have that agreement in place. You don't need them that often, but when you do need them, you need them on like a moment's notice. And if you don't have them in place, then you kind of are scrambling to figure out, okay, what's going on? I need to have this operating agreement in place. I remember back when COVID was, you know, thriving and they were doing all these programs like the payroll protection program, the PPP program. And when I applied for that for my law firm, they asked for a copy of our operating agreement. So we had to have that, and we had to provide that to them to show that we legitimately were a business. So it's really important that you have that contract in place in case anyone ever asks or anyone ever needs that from you. So definitely make sure you get an operating agreement. Again, link down below to a resource that I recommend for that. And along those lines, number 7 is to make sure that when you are signing contracts on behalf of the LLC, that you're actually signing contracts on behalf of the LLC. So if you hire a marketing consultant, or you hire an independent contractor, or you hire, you know, anyone like that, and they have a contract for you, or you need to prepare a contract for them, it is very important that you make sure the contract is between this other party and your LLC, not this other party and you as a person. That is a no-go, that is a big mistake. If you do it that way, then you're basically setting yourself up for problems, because the contract is going to be between you personally and this other party, as opposed to your LLC and the other party. And so you want to make sure that when you're reading through that contract, if they list your name as opposed to your LLC, you want to make sure they correct that. If you're doing your own contracts, and again, I have a contract template store if you want to check it out, I'll link down below. when you're setting up that contract, you want to make sure that you list the name of your LLC as the party that you are controlling in that contract. And then when you sign the contract, the best way to do it is to list, the name of your LLC and then by with a colon, and then sign your name with your name underneath it as a member or owner of the LLC. That's the best way to do it. That's best practice. A lot of people mess this up because they just include their personal name on the contract. Don't do that. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you include the LLC and enter the contract as the owner of your LLC. Which brings us to number 8, and that is that you need to make sure you calendar important deadlines related to your LLC. I probably could have made this number 1, but I still think that forming an LLC in the wrong state is probably number 1. But not calendaring the deadlines, missing those important deadlines, is one of the single biggest causes of problems with LLCs that I see from my clients. And here's kind of the way this shakes down. Whenever I bring on a new client, whether it be a trademark client or someone who needs help with something related to LLC or a contract, the first thing I do is I look up their LLC in the state where they're operating to see if the LLC is active. And I will tell you, probably more than 50% of the time, there is going to be a problem with their LLC. In other words, they have not been filing their annual reports. They've not been filing their annual taxes that they owe, their franchise taxes. They've not been doing something else that they have to do to keep their LLC solvent. So this actually happened to me. I got a notification from the North Carolina Secretary of State last year about this time that they had suspended my law firm. And this was really scary to me because that is a big problem. That can't happen. And when I looked to see what the problem was, I called them to figure out what the problem was. And it was because I'd failed to file a tax return back in like 2016 for my law firm for the state of North Carolina. Now here's the thing about these tax returns. It's not really, there's no tax due. It's just basically a return you file that shows how much money you made for the year and shows that you owe no tax. That's all you gotta do. It's a fairly simple return. And so I didn't actually owe any taxes. I just hadn't filed the return. And the reason I hadn't filed the return is because it was right around the time that my mother had passed away and I was in a bad spot personally. And so, I don't need to get too much into it, but the bottom line is I made a mistake one year and I forgot to file my corporate tax return. I went ahead and I filed the tax return and they reinstated it and everything was fine. It was not a big deal. But there's a couple really important lessons from this. Number one, anybody can make a mistake that could cause a problem with your LLC. Number two, where do you think they sent the notification that my LLC has been suspended to? They sent it to my registered agent. So if your registered agent is not updated, I would never have known about that. And my law firm might still be suspended. Now it's not, everything's fine and everything's good. And there was a small penalty that I had to pay. And thank God it was a small penalty. It was like $25 or something, maybe $50. But it could have been thousands and thousands of dollars, all because I made this very simple mistake. If I was in another state, it could have been more. So you gotta be very careful about that. And so you need to make sure you calendar those deadlines. I bring this up now because next month is April and a lot of states, their annual reports are due in April each year, along the same time that you file your regular tax returns. Some states, they're due on the anniversary of your LLC. Other states, they're due every other year. So you just need to check with the state that you file your LLC in, where you live, hopefully where you live, to make sure you are meeting those deadlines and not missing anything that could cause problems for your LLC. I told the story at the beginning of the video about a client I had who had a business partner who died, and their LLC was administratively dissolved prior to the business partner passing away. And it was administratively dissolved because they hadn't paid their annual reports. And because of that, they had transferred real estate through the deed, and the business partner had signed the deed, but the deed was void. And so we're talking about a several $100,000 piece of real estate never actually got transferred because the LLC had been suspended, so the deed was void. And since the business partner had died, they couldn't correct the problem and had to go through probate. Big, huge issue. All these things can be fixed if you follow these proper corporate formalities. And so people think these things can't happen, but they absolutely can happen, and they probably will happen unless you take steps to make sure that they don't. And one of those things is to make sure you calendar all those deadlines so that you don't forget each year to file your annual report. It's a simple thing, but if you forget, it can be a big problem. We do include an annual reporting service as part of our LLC formation service. Again, link down below if you're interested in learning more. So if you like this video and you want to learn more about setting up your LLC properly, here's another video I did right here to learn more about that. Have a great day, folks, and we'll see you next time. Take care.